I know I'm severely late to the party, but you guys know about the Unity runtime fee, right? If you don't, then crap. Anyway, Unity recently decided to throw the entire game dev community under the bus yet again by trying to force you to pay for every time someone installs your game, which terribly backfired. Now I know what you might be asking, but didn't they already roll back most of the changes by limiting the runtime fee to 2.5% of your revenue and removing it altogether for the personal edition of Unity? Well, yes, they did, but I don't really think I can trust Unity as a company anymore due to how many times they've done something similar in the past. And what if they do the exact same thing as what happened a few months ago in like 2 years from now? So because of me dying of cringe from Unity's business decisions, I've decided to migrate to Unreal Engine because of it. Now I know what you might be asking, the frick dude, why didn't you switch to Godot? It's open source and it's not made by Epic Games. Okay, I decided to learn Unreal and not something like Godot since I feel like it'll be a better engine for some very overambitious games I want to eventually work on, and probably stop working on them after 3 months due to lack of motivation. Plus, I've already been wanting to try Unreal Engine because of the blueprint system and because of things like Lumen and Nanite. Now I know what you might be asking. Alright, I should probably just get to the video already before this intro gets too long. The first day of learning Unreal was pretty much just me installing and trying to get used to the engine's UI, nothing really that much. I also watched a tutorial on the basics of the engine by this one guy on YouTube. Over the next few days, I watched some more tutorials on the basics of Unreal Engine like the UI, hotkeys and shortcuts, blueprints, and even got my first introduction into blend spaces. On days 4 to 7, I followed a couple several-hour courses by Smart Poly. These ended up helping a hell of a ton with my time learning the engine. They again showed the basics of the engine like the UI, input systems, blueprints, and I also ended up setting up Quixel Bridge. Now because of my false sense of confidence, I've decided to try and make a game to practice my skills using Unreal Engine. The game is pretty much going to be a 3D remake of another game I made in my game design class where you pretty much just collect stuff while avoiding the enemies to get to the next level. It's simple really. We used ClickTeam Fusion to make it so I was pretty limited on what I could do in it. For example, I couldn't make the game 3D and I don't think I was able to add any lights, so the entire art style is being carried by my pixel art skills. Although it is pretty damn good if you're a beginner in the game dev scene. Before this turns into a rant about a completely separate game engine entirely unrelated to Unreal Engine 5, let's move to week 2 of learning it. On the second week, I started to work on my game's prototype. You know, just the basic mechanics of the game, seeing if it sticks and doing the visuals later. I spent a couple days on doing the player controller and enemies. I didn't feel like bothering with AI, nav meshes, and pathfinding, so I decided to just make a simple script so the enemies move towards the player and bounce on impact. Once I was mostly done with the main gameplay, I wanted to make a cool door that opened once you collect all the collectibles, which in this case were batteries. So, I made this door in Blender and imported it to Unreal Engine with absolutely no mishaps or errors. Of course I'm lying. If you'll let me vent about how unreliable Unreal is at importing files real quick, I just want to say how damn sensitive it is. Like half the times I try to import a file, the thing just crashes out of nowhere. I've spent so much time trying to troubleshoot it. Hell, I even tried digging into the crash logs just to find some import setting to magically fix it. But sometimes, even when I do try and get the correct settings, the thing decides to just... Anyway, I eventually got the door to import correctly, and I had to use a timeline node to actually get them to open. Timelines are pretty weird, but they're extremely useful for simple movements like a door. So I finally got the door working after a day of troubleshooting and the prototype's essentially finished. Then I made this dude in Blender. As I said earlier, this game is essentially just a remake of another game I made in ClickTeam Fusion, so I tried to make it as faithful to this as possible. Anyway, I made a walking and idle animation for him and slapped him into Unreal Engine. Obviously not without more crashing while importing. I tied his animations up to the movement and got the player completely finished. Also, I somehow made this happen while testing, which I found pretty funny. Now we kill the player. Back in Blender, I made a death animation for the player and performed the drill. Attempt to import it into Unreal, witness it crash for some reason, cry, spend hours looking up the same phrases expecting something different, and find that it miraculously works out of nowhere now. I learned how to use animation state machines, which are surprisingly similar to Unity. There's an animation tree where you can wire different states to each other, but you can add actual nodes within those states, which I really like by the way. I also whipped up some UI animations. Now, you can't have a player die without a game over screen, so I got straight to work on that. The game over screen I wanted to make was pretty much a clone of the one seen in Hi-Fi Rush. Best game ever by the way, please buy it. I thought it'd be a pretty fun challenge to make something similar. I first made a slower and more dramatic falling animation for the player, since, that's literally the first thing the player sees. I then made this very epic looking spotlight. This definitely didn't take hours to do just from trying to turn on volumetric lighting to get the light rays working. And to top off week 3, I ended up modeling and animating this drone guy as an enemy. If you couldn't tell already, I was going for a futuristic style for my game. Going into week 4, I decided to learn how to use the Niagara particle system that's used in Unreal. It's different, yet similar to Unity's particle system at the same time, if you know what I mean. For one, it's node-based, which I find weird, and second of all, there's templates so you can have an easier time with the particle system. I added this particle system to a battery model I made, which I think it looks really nice. The next day, I messed with Niagara some more by adding more particle systems for the drone, environment, and even the game over screen I made earlier. Can't have too many particles, right? At this point, I guess it was time to actually make a level for my game. I messed around in Blender a bit and made these embarrassingly simple level tiles. These tiles are meant to be placed in a grid pattern, as you can see here. Once I got the layout of the level done, I decided to further work on the visuals for my game. I wanted to make some sort of moving background to make the game more interesting, so I made this cube that randomly moves up and down. Now you see this sloppy looking text on the tutorial level, right? I want that, but better. I made it so the text is based on the UI, and so it changes when the player does something, like getting hit or completing the level. This took an embarrassing amount of time to do, but I'm pretty proud of the results. Oh yeah, I also got the second level done that day, which I think I did a pretty decent job on. During this week, I spent most of my time on the rest of the levels. For this level, I wanted to make 2 paths, not only to mix up the game a bit, and not make the entire game just an open area with some batteries and enemies, and also to actually make the player think where they want to go to collect the batteries. For this one, I was originally going to make a chase sequence level, but I wasn't sure if it'd be executed well due to how bad the drone collisions are. I didn't want to bother rewiring the entire drone blueprint to have actual pathfinding. I decided to make this one a bit harder since it was going to be one of the last levels I was going to be working on for this game. I don't really have anything else to say about this level. This level is literally just you walking for a while. I wanted to make it like this with no music or anything to signify that this is indeed the final level of the game. My god, this sounds so stupid. Now, what do I need to add now? Oh, right! The main menu! I spent the next couple days working on a main menu for the game, featuring the player and the drone running across the screen. I also think it's a good time to come up with an actual name for my game. This was the best I can think of, okay? Finally, for week 6, I found some really nice music for the game over screen. I think it fits very well. Top off my game, I want to make an epic looking cutscene for its ending. It's going to be pretty simple, just a player running from a couple drones in a straight line towards a door. So first, after realizing that I can't make animations inside of Unreal, I made an exaggerated running animation in Blender. If you actually can make animations in Unreal Engine and I'm just an idiot, please let me know in the comments. Anyway, after that I plugged the animations into the level sequencer and just moved the level itself to make it look like the character's running. After adding UI and some final touches like particle systems, here's the final cutscene. Upon reflection, I actually really enjoyed using Unreal Engine during these 8 weeks. The engine has so many quality of life features that just make everything so much easier to work with. Not to mention how easy it is to make your game actually look good graphic-wise. Not sure if I said this already, but pretty much the only two things that carried my game's visuals were particle systems and point lights. That's literally it. Although, I did find the engine crashing a lot. Like, it was crashing a ton when I tried to make a build for the game. It just threw an error at me and I had zero idea how to solve it. It would also just crash out of nowhere at times. But besides the constant crashing, I'd gladly use Unreal for my games until I can actually gain Unity's trust again in case they decide to bankrupt every indie studio again, which I highly doubt they won't do.